Thank you so much.
Our next session is being led by Jack Bobo. Take it away, Jack.
Great, thank you. And it's a pleasure to see everybody again today. And it was a pretty exciting program yesterday, and I think we're in store for an even more interesting and exciting conversation today. We're not going to be spending a lot of time with long introductions, but I did want to mention that our first speaker, Dr. Mark Lyons, will not be able to stick around for the panel discussion after his keynote, and so hopefully he'll be able to take a few questions when he finishes his keynote remarks. And so I would encourage everybody, if you do have questions that you think of while Dr. Lyons is speaking, please pass them along and we will try to catch them at the end of the session. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Mark Lyons, the CEO of Alltech, a really exciting company. I don't want to mention what they're doing because I'm sure that he'll get into that. But Mark has had a remarkable career working in many countries around the world. I'm impressed. He speaks 6 languages and he's just an amazing person. So Mark, I'm going to let you take it away and tell us about some of the things that Alltech's been doing over the last 40 years and what you plan on doing over the next 40. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jack. Great to be with you. And it was very interesting to be hearing a little bit of the previous speakers. I think the program looks extraordinarily strong and as was expected. So excited to be here. Hopefully share a little bit of what we are looking at, what we're working on. And I think more than anything, continuing this discussion and this dialogue, I think as we heard from our last speaker, it's going to take a lot of diverse, different ways of doing things to overcome a lot of the challenges we have. And that's a lot of the message that we will share. Our big message is working together for a planet of plenty. And I always emphasize to our colleagues that working together is even more important than actually the planet of plenty vision. It's how we are really going to achieve everything that we want to. So, I think this is an interesting moment to come together. We've got an awful lot of different things taking place, lots of different disparate views. And so, I think it's so important, even when we are a little bit distanced, that we have these ongoing dialogues and conversations and realize that it's really been, I think, the take home for me that during this time, we kind of can get sucked into our own little bubbles and we don't have those opportunities to engage as we normally would. And so great and so happy you guys have continued to push forward. One of the things that I think is defining our time, though, is really that so much of what is out there, and we can see it obviously with what is taking place in this country right now in the US around vaccine usage, is that society is being led by ideology, not by science. And I think that's something that's really critical as a science-based company, as a company that even has a microscope within our logo. This is always what is pushing us forward. How do we make sure that we focus on the science, that we're led by the science, and that is going to be what can help us to achieve so much that we need to. Of course, when we get a little bit closer to home, when we think about agri-food, a lot of messages out in the media, a lot of negativity, and really a lot of very simple answers being grabbed, when in reality, we all know the solutions are going to be much more nuanced and are going to need to be things that we join up in our thinking and join up in our approaches. And so it's our belief that a lot of these well-intended actions are going to fail, and they're going to fail because in many regards, they're uninformed. And I think in another really important area, they're not inclusive. We've got to make sure that we're pulling in people who know about the food industry, that know about agriculture, and that are certainly people who are working day in, day out to continue to become more efficient. How do we bring this process forward and do things in a slightly different way? And so when we look at a lot of the business models, we look at a lot of startups, we look at everything throughout the agri-food industry. One thing that I lament is that this is an industry that if you go out and you talk to producers, if you talk to industry leaders, and you say, we're going to disrupt you, that is actually quite different in our industry, I think, than in many others. That isn't necessarily the opportunity. I think collaboration is the opportunity. And I don't like the approach, to be honest, where we see businesses really looking at denigrating an industry or much more so than just disrupting. And so I think collaboration is probably going to be the biggest message that I keep harping on about today, because I think that is really the key. That is the opportunity. When we think about agriculture, we have to realize we are in a different sector. We're in a sector where many small holders, many producers, many agripreneurs are in areas where they don't have a lot of economic opportunities. We can bring them forward when we work collectively, and that's a really exciting opportunity. And so I think a lot of the changes that are being proposed actually could create not just a disaster for human nutrition, but also for planet and societal health. And so I think we need to kind of pump the brakes sometimes and say, how do we do things a little bit differently? There's a lot of push, of course, to change human diets, and that somehow is going to play the biggest role in saving the planet. It will play some role, but I think that what we can see is there's so many different ways to be producing food. And if we do make those changes, actually changing what is on our plate isn't going to save the planet. We have to realize that there is a lot more out there. We've been doing a lot of work looking at the data and realizing that when we look at our sector, when we look at agriculture, we look at agri-food even more in a broad sense, there are so much more that is happening in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. And ultimately, it's us taking fossil fuels out of the ground and putting those into the atmosphere that is really driving things the most. We have to take full responsibility. There's so much that we can continue to improve within agri-food, but we also have to take personal accountability in terms of what we do day in and day out. So, if we move completely to a vegan diet, we will not ultimately solve this big problem that we're trying to solve. And that is something that I think we have to keep front and center. And it means that within our businesses, we also have to be thinking about the other emissions we have. And that is where we're really taking a holistic view. And also that is exactly what we're communicating to our customer base and all of our stakeholders, even much more important, really our supplier base, where we can have an even more outsized impact. So when we look at this, I think when you see what's going on in the media, a lot of times you're vilifying what actually could be the solution, and still ignoring what really may be some of the biggest causes and biggest issues. So we think about some of these concepts that are put out there, a world without cows. Well, this really would be something that could really denigrate a lot of our soil quality. It could really impact ultimately the health of our grasslands, and it really takes us back and away from what is really a balance of nature. I had the great opportunity, really my first and maybe only trip of this pandemic time that was purely something that was something to go and see some friends. I went to the last state that I had not visited, Montana, and I was chatting with some folks out there, and as we were seeing some incredible bison in their natural habitat as we moved into Wyoming in Yellowstone Park. And I was talking to them about how many bison were on this planet. There were 50 to 60 million just in the US. Really not that long ago, 1800s, early 1800s, you see that many animals, and there was this natural cycle. And I think we have to keep remembering that is exactly where many of our soils were created. That is what those ecosystems look like. And when we think about regenerative agriculture and so many of the things that people are working on, some of the really exciting things, and we've already heard microbiome, and we got to think about the microbiome in the animal, but also microbiome, of course, in the soil. That is exactly what we need to be thinking about. How do we think about agriculture in a different way, not simply just the outputs and achieve its cost of production, but something that brings in so much more. And so we also realized that if we were to remove ruminant animals, we would often be losing a lot of the fight that we have around food waste. We are looking at this, and we've got several projects around food waste right now. And a lot of those systems, agriculture systems, are utilizing many materials that would end up in landfill. And we also know that, according to the FAO, a significant portion, 86% of livestock feed is actually not suitable for human consumption. And so whether it's marginalized lands or it's materials that cannot be utilized, we have to be thinking again in this broad way and collaborating to make sure we come out with the best outcomes. We also are concerned, of course, with agricultural communities, especially in fast-growing markets. We have 1.3 billion people who directly get their livelihoods from agriculture and animal agriculture in particular. And so this also creates a huge amount of the very, very important protein that we need. Most of us on this call are probably in a portion of society that maybe would say we have enough protein, or we can potentially have different protein. We have economic means to be able to do that. This is not just for livelihoods, but also for people's own nutrition, which of course is one of the big concerns. So we don't want to be eroding these economies, nor do we want to be eroding some of the crucial elements that play into our diets when we're thinking about animal agriculture and we're thinking about agriculture in an even broader sense. This was an interesting study that really struck us, that if we removed, for example, the US dairy industry, we would be reducing greenhouse gases by 0.7%, while significantly lowering 39 essential nutrients for humans. And so that's pretty alarming, I think, when we think about some of the changes we want to make. We want to make sure that we're doing these in a responsible way and that what we're replacing them with is actually better, which I think in many cases we have not proven out yet. So that's a lot of what we are working on today, is making sure that no matter what we do, we have a real impact, not just something that's buzzy and is going to sell. So who are the true experts when it comes to all of this? We know there's a lot of policymakers that are certainly talking, whether it's virtually or otherwise in places like Davos, perhaps at the UN. But in reality, the real experts are still the people on this call, the people that are out, who are producers, who are technologists. And that is really the people who are going to make the difference here. And that's been one of the challenges we've seen. How do we remove some of the bluster, some of the PR, and really get down to the facts and make sure that we are making real changes that will present us with a much better outcome? We think that we really are on the brink of a bold and exciting new era. And so within our business, we are focusing very much on a belief that we hold dear. Our vision is for a world of abundance where we can have enough abundant, nutritious food, and that this food not only can be produced in a way that reduces environmental impact, but also where we can be providing better nutrition and ultimately better health outcomes for our global population. And ultimately, that's what this is all about. Agri-food, the entire industry is all about health, improving human health and planetary health. And so that is what we talk about when we are thinking about what we call Planet of Plenty. And it's our belief that agriculture has the greatest potential to positively shape the future of our planet, the future of our societies. We have also seen in many cases that we may have the potential to be removing so much greenhouse gases and actually producing continually in a more efficient way. And this potentially could actually have a cooling effect on the planet. This is going to be made possible through the utilization of new technologies, new management practices, and what is really exciting, which we've seen over the last couple of years now that we're really 2 years into our Planet of Plenty mission, is new business models, working with different people in new ways and collaborating and creating opportunities and incentives. And I think that was mentioned in some of the earlier talks. We have to make sure that farmers are incentivized to be doing what they already want to do. They want to take care of the environment around them. They want to be taking care of their animals in more and more effective ways. And so these new business models are crucial in terms of achieving what we want to achieve. We have, Jack, as you've mentioned many times, had created extraordinary efficiencies over the last 40, 50 years. And so we already have a track record. And sometimes, as you've correctly stated, we don't take the right view. We don't think about what has actually been done and realize that the trajectory is really quite positive. We have been producing more with less for a long time. And so we should have confidence going forward that we can continue and in fact, speed up. We can continue to improve because I think there's far more awareness right now of these issues. And I would also say what we find talking to our customer base is much more openness to change. And I think we've overcome many of those obstacles. And so that really creates that chance to really move quickly. We did a study recently in a part of the world that we're pretty passionate about, which is Ireland, one of the most efficient producers of certainly milk and beef in the world. And that's a place you would think how much more intensity can be reduced. And we were able to see that, in fact, we could reduce greenhouse gas emissions by a further 50% with technologies that exist today. And so I think that just shows even just implementing what we have today really can continue to make that dramatic impact. And imagine how many more ideas there are, especially within this audience, to improve even further. And so we have to be thinking in that very holistic way as we go forward. One of the books that we've been using over the last couple of years is Factfulness. Hans Rosling writing the book with his son and his daughter-in-law. If you haven't picked up a copy, if you haven't seen some of the talks online, I would highly encourage you to do so. Anna Rosling Runland, Hans's daughter-in-law, was actually on our One conference earlier this year, and he talked about being a possibilist, that this was the way, if we looked at the world and we thought about what was possible, that this wasn't optimism, this was truly looking at those facts and seeing what we can continue to improve. And the fact is that the world is probably better than most of us think it is. And so make sure you do go out and check Gapminder and Factfulness, highly impactful, and has really been one of the things that has underpinned our belief in Planet of Plenty. looking at the world in that slightly different way. And what we could see is this was very much akin to our leader, our founder's vision. My father very much thinking 41 years ago when he established the business that there was a chance to create a business that could have a tremendous positive impact on the future. He used his expertise, which was yeast fermentation, and was able to grow a business around that. So Alltech really is that science company, that technology company that he built, and also brings in another element of the story that he was very much well-versed in, which is storytelling. We have to make sure that we can, even though we are not a food company, not a company that is connected directly to consumers in most cases, we need to be able to communicate to those consumers, because they ultimately are the ones that are going to decide the direction, the future, and we have to be communicating to them in a way that they can respond to, and making sure that we're getting the facts to them in the most effective manner. Alltech now truly is a global business. We operate in over 120 countries, always backed by that science. And I think what's exciting with the scientific aspect is that we now have over 20 research alliances. This is a way that we can collaborate locally with companies and with institutes, with scientists all around the world. And that is the way that we feel, ultimately maximize our impact. So we took that initial message, that philosophy that my father had, which he called the ACE principle. And this stood for the welfare and the health of the animal and agriculture, the direction of the consumer and the importance of their health, and of course, the health of our environment. And I think what's notable in this case is that this is something that he started talking about in the mid-1980s. So this is way ahead of when these were really concepts, especially for a business in our sector, very much in the beginning parts, producing products that go into the animal feed chain and also into the agronomy chain. We've taken that concept and that legacy and moved into this new idea of Planet of Plenty. And so our direction every day is focusing on producing the smartest and most sustainable solutions for agriculture in whatever way, in whatever avenue we can. Sometimes those are direct inputs. In other regards, those are collaborations we have within the food industry. So we're working on that soil side, making sure that we're producing products that potentially can be more natural, removing some synthetic products, chemical pesticides, et cetera, and improving that microbiome in the soil. That allows us to have better feed products. It allows us to have better products that will go into the human food chain as well. Directly working on farm and improving the efficiency and working directly with producers. Ultimately, we have to be giving them those economic incentives and improving their profitability, and more working with food businesses, looking for ways where we can improve the types of products, the health, the freshness, and the food safety of the products that they are ultimately providing for us as consumers. So Alltech sits in an interesting area, and we have a connection with the traditional aspects of agriculture, but very much with an eye towards the future of food. And I think that's been one of the most exciting areas as we've worked with a number of companies outside, whether they're startups, whether they're businesses that are well established. We can make those connections between technology, between the producer and the programmer, and that's a really critical aspect of our program. One of the major competitors, though, to agriculture really is sometimes what holds us back the most. It's tradition. And so we do things because that's the way we always did them in agriculture. We do them this way because we don't want to take risks. And I think what we can see in some of the previous talks is how do we make sure we remove some of that risk from the scenario? How do we create those incentives for producers to take that leap of faith that they may need to take to grab onto new ideas? And as they do those, how do we create those reproducible models? I think that idea of learning from one geography to another is so critical to the success that we're going to have as an industry. So my father wanted our business to be an innovation house. He ultimately said that was his dream, was to create all sorts of innovations in every single aspect of our business. And so we've taken that idea and we've formulated it, we've codified it a little bit here, and we are creating what are Lyons Innovation Centers. We're going to have one here in Kentucky and one back over in Ireland. And so that is a way for us to partner, to co-innovate with customers and to bring them in-house and think about ideas with our technologists of all shapes and sizes. We also have our Lyons incubator This is something very much internal. And then we have our Lyons cultivator. And so I'll quickly just touch on how we are doing these things. We've launched what we call Planet of Plenty partnerships. We've worked with several different organizations. We continue to add to this list. In certain cases, these are direct customers. And these businesses are very much connected and committed to the same vision that we have. How do we continue to reduce our environmental impact? How do we produce more healthy and nutritious food? And how do we do so in a way that we're able to communicate effectively to consumers? And so, I think this alignment and working beyond one company and increasingly across industries is really going to be critical to achieving so many of the goals that we have. We're also looking at our business internally and saying one of the key aspects that we've got to have is entrepreneurship. We can't always be going outside and finding businesses outside. We also know we have a tremendous number of entrepreneurs within our company. That is what grew our business. It was connecting with entrepreneurs in many different countries and many different markets, and they are the ones that grew Alltech. And so what we've done is we've actually started to take some of those individuals, put them on key products, key projects, and really take those ideas further than they would be going if they sat within the traditional Alltech. And so one of those is a product that we launched, a nutraceutical brand that was launched earlier this year, Acutia. It's gotten out of the gate with great success. Nikki, who was on the previous slide, took this on as an entrepreneur working within the business, worked very much like a startup and has been able to take this product to the market. And now we have a lot of new exciting things we're going to be launching in 2022, taking this yet further. And so this is a model that we want to continue and will continue to reproduce, getting some of these ideas that have been sitting within the organization latent for a long time. This idea of getting something like organic selenium, such a critical element to all human health and animal health, directly to consumers was something that is an idea that was probably over a dozen years old. And so great to see how these decade-old ideas are able to be sped up through this type of an activity. So we're working with entrepreneurs within the business, thinking and working like startups within the company, making sure that we're moving some of those ideas that haven't moved forward for years into a faster and more sped up mechanism. And this is something that we're working on all the time. And we're also working with startups. And we've changed, I would say, in a couple of significant ways in this effort. This originally was the Lyons Accelerator, where we're working directly with businesses, trying to help them to organize their business models, learning a lot from them, but also helping to share with them ideas around presenting skills and a number of other aspects. And what we've changed is we said, we need to step back. There's so many urgent, big ideas and big issues that we need to focus on right now. Let's think about those ideas and then bring in companies that can help us to bridge the gap and the gaps that we see within our own capabilities. And so this is really much more synergistic and has been highly effective. And so it's been really exciting to see how that program has developed. And so it is something that we're running year round. Previously, this was something that was a bit of a campaign running up to our one conference in May. Now we are working on these initiatives all the time, which is really critical. Some of these include presently ideas around carbon capture in agriculture, concepts around net zero in many different species and many different production systems, and a lot of work around that microbiome that I think is really highly critical in an area that we have a lot of really over 3 decades of research on. And so something that we are very, very passionate and interested in. Looking towards pilot projects, places where we can go start up a project quickly. One of the great things we have is that connection with those customers. We can reach out to them, pull things together, and really see if concepts work. And always taking that bespoke approach, that customized approach to each situation. We utilize sometimes sponsors from internally within the business, and also we are looking to partner with people from outside. So this is all about achieving the answers to some of those big questions. And in many regards, I think where this is going next and what we're seeing happening is an increased collaboration and work with sponsors from outside and companies that may want to also come in from a financial perspective. Ultimately, our goal here is to achieve the answers to those big challenges and not have a prescribed approach in how we're going to do that. So we've been able and been very fortunate to work with a number of startup businesses. A lot of these have moved on and had great success. And it's great to see that happening because of that alignment ultimately around one mission and one direction. It's great to celebrate everything that everybody has been doing. So as we go forward, a lot of this is about certainly staying ahead of the curve and having that innovation, but looking for those win-win opportunities, working together being that critical aspect, and that innovation with the producer. This is really where we can come in, we can make that connection, Alltech being a trusted brand, having those long-term relationships, trust being such a critical factor in our sector. That really, I think, helps us to make sure that we ultimately end up with those right outcomes. But one thing I learned recently, which really was staggering, that when we think, and I think everybody on this call certainly would agree, that agri-food represents one of the biggest opportunities for climate change mitigation, but it's only receiving 1% of climate funding. And I thought that was a bit of a call for action, and that's why I wanted to share that today. There's a lot of money, there's a lot of people investing, and a lot of times when they are investing in our sector, they aren't necessarily investing actually in agriculture. They're investing in things that may disrupt or denigrate the industry. If we really want to have a difference, if we really want to make an impact, and we especially want to make sure that we're impacting all of those individuals involved directly in agriculture, we need to make sure that those funds are going to the right places. And so, I think that's a kind of a bit of a call to action for all of us to be thinking about. So as we look at it, science is what underpins everything we do. It's really what gives us that ability to move sustainability forward. It advances that sustainability, but we have to be able to bring what we are doing to life through storytelling. And that is a lot of where we're using some of the capabilities we have in-house. We have over 20 people in our own media department. They are telling those stories of innovators who are doing things differently. And that not only encourages others to be doing those same things and creating those innovations that we believe will be probably table stakes in 10 to 20 years, but also to communicate to consumers. And so we need to make sure that we're doing that in that appropriate way. Powered by partnership, this is really such a critical element. We've got to make sure that we have those partnerships, and that's really one of the call to actions I have today. If you're interested in some of the ideas that we're working in, please do contact us. The Cultivator is an opportunity, the Planet of Plenty partnerships are an opportunity, and there are many others as well. So Jack, you're one that has really laid down the gauntlet and said the next 30 years are the most important in the history and future of agriculture. And so the time is now. This is a moment where we are very much aligning everything we have around a broad view of sustainability. And so that's a really critical aspect of where we're going next. And so there is something that we need to do, and we need to do it now. If we can have a legacy mindset, if we can see that even the challenges we have today can be turned into an opportunity and a gift, then we can really put ourselves in the place of best potential. And so this is the moment, I think, that we need to be acting, we need to be moving ahead, and freeing ourselves from the idea that there is only one right answer. There are many, many more than one right answer. And we're going to see many different scenarios that help us to reduce environmental impact and produce more food that our planet needs. And I think that kind of frees us up from some of the conflict that I mentioned early on. We want to make sure that we are really thinking about this from a very broad perspective. If we can do that, I think we really will have much better outcomes, and ultimately we'll thrive together through all of this. So we believe that no industry has that potential, has that ability to have a positive impact on the future of our planet. And while doing so, will nourish our world and cool the climate. And that is really what drives us every day, making sure that we're not leaving a footprint, but truly a legacy, and ultimately can be working together for a planet of plenty. So Jack, I think hopefully we have a few questions that have come through.
Great. Well, thank you, Mark. Brilliant as always, fascinating. I learned a lot. I kept thinking of questions, and then you kept getting to them in the presentation. So that's fantastic, when you're anticipating what the viewer is thinking. So I'm going to ask one quick question, and then hopefully Rohit or somebody else will be able to tee up one or two questions. But, I wanted to start out by saying, I appreciate the positioning and the framing of the Planet of Plenty. Because too often with some of the other initiatives that you mentioned that are happening around the globe right now, agriculture is framed as a problem that must be solved, as opposed to agriculture being the solution to the problem. And, I think, as you said, it's so critical, because if you want people to work with you, you can't say, you're bad, stop being bad. It's really about encouraging people to work with us. And the Planet of Plenty, I think, is very much about what we could be doing instead of telling people what we should be doing. My kids certainly don't like it when I try to tell them what they should be doing. So one of the things you mentioned that different organizations you want to partner. And so if there's anything else you can tell us, or if there's a link or someplace where people can go to partner either on Planet of Plenty or with the accelerator, because we have a lot of entrepreneurs that are listening today, and they'd probably be delighted to learn more about how they might engage. And so after that, maybe if there's a question, otherwise I'll ask a couple more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the messages and one of the reasons I think that we talk a lot about, this denigration issue is that when we start to speak to a lot of producers, generally they have a pretty negative feeling, I would say, from all of this pressure that's coming. And I think we have to be mindful of, especially throughout this pandemic period, we've really thought a lot about how mental health can be a factor, and how we think about how we operate in society. And I think that we were I would say maybe 5-10 years ago, there was a big push to get producers to get on social media a lot more. And I would say by and large, they found that to be a pretty negative experience. They've tried to share a little bit of what they do and how they care for their animals. And typically, as many of us have found, social media hasn't worked out to be the friendliest place. And so I think that that's something that we need to take on board and realize that these are people who truly love their animals, love their land, want to pass it on to the next generation. That is typically the top thing you hear when you're speaking to people within agriculture. And so they want that chance to work together and really also demonstrate what they're doing. And so I think taking some of the vitriol out of the conversation is really important. And I would agree, you don't achieve a lot by pointing fingers. So I think those things are hopefully starting to take shape. And again, for food companies, what we've found is much more effective to start to pull in the supplier base and have dialogue, have conversations, and say, okay, we all want to achieve the same thing. How do we make sure that we're aligned to do that and incentivize, throughout the chain? So I think with that type of an approach, a huge amount can be achieved. I think if we don't take that approach, we're going to end up with a bit of an impasse. And it's really been my kind of aha moment of recent, just thinking of some of the challenges we've had in this country, just getting people to wear masks, get vaccinated, that approach is going to be challenging. We also need to be thinking about business models to truly be sequestering significant amounts of carbon. And I think agriculture has a tremendous opportunity to do that.
Great. So Rohit, or if any of the organizers have a question that has come in, please flag up.
Thank you, Mark. Really inspiring, wonderful comments. I just want to be able to collapse two of the questions that have come in into one. And specifically, first of all, thanking you for citing the study from Virginia Tech and asking how the results of those types of studies and the role communities of scientists and corporates can do to effectively go over the kind of buzz of agriculture's harm to the environment. So what are some thoughts that you have on being able to communicate that beyond the sort of inside baseball kind of conversations that we have?
Yeah, I think that, getting, I mentioned factfulness, and that's one of the conversations and projects we've started is actually an ag factfulness project, and basically saying, let's try and get some version of the truth. I think we're always going to have some different messages out there. But studies like that are crucial. You saw on that slide, UC Davis's Clear Center, we've been working a lot with them. There's a lot of institutes around the world doing more and more work on this. We are, probably shifting, having done so much of our support for PhDs and master's students over the years that were always on our technologies. Now there's a lot more going towards some of these topics, and a lot of groups coming together to say, let's make sure that we get some of those out. We held a UN Food Systems Summit discussion. I think a number of other businesses have. I think that's really important, because I think it's important whether it's within a company or it's separate to, those can be important conversations, and we make sure that we do have a voice within those. Again, I think everybody is trying to achieve the same types of things, and making sure that we put that first and foremost out there is important. But a lot of what are in people's minds, I think we have to keep pushing against the some of the messages that are simply incorrect, because I think we could end up in a situation that, as I said in the beginning, we end up impairing human health and also don't aid planetary health.
Thank you, Mark. This is Rohit Shukla, by the way, from Larta. Thank you so much, Jack. Go ahead.
Great. Well, I'd love to keep asking you questions. I'm particularly interested in any learnings that you have on the startup community, advice that you could give to entrepreneurs. If there are any sort of quick points that you have, please shout them out. But otherwise, if you have any last words for us, please pass them along.
Yeah, I think just be open. We have a totally different presentation that my father put together, which was, I think, very inspiring for many of the entrepreneurs we've worked with. I think the idea of failing fast, getting up, moving forward is something that he's always talked about, and we know well. But I also think just not being hesitant, ultimately having the confidence to move ahead. I think there's so much focus and concern often around losing control. And that sometimes holds us back from real progress. And so, to us, it is, as long as we're aligned and all directed around our vision and our purpose, good things tend to happen. And I think that's the key thing. So if we can be helpful at all, I think that's one of the nice things of having that purpose. It means that we can collaborate, we can work with lots of different groups, and we're open to do so. The Alltech website is a great way, the Planet of Plenty website, or the Pure Science Cultivator. But I think that what you'll find with Alltechians, as we call them, all around the world, is they tend to be very open, and so very much looking forward to some subsequent conversations that could come out of today.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I know I've met, many of your colleagues around the world, and it's always been a great experience, and they are absolutely open to collaboration. So thank you very much, Mark.